Well, hey, gang, Raj here. I know I sound like a broken record, but I do want to say thank you to everyone who has sent a kind word of encouragement. I am about 4 months past our last big surgery. They replaced about 80% of my tongue, so I still sound a little weird. And if it looks like there's something in my mouth, there is. It's a part of my leg. That's what they use to rebuild me. So there we are. Let's jump into this thing, man. I wanted to get on today. It's the end of the year as I'm recording this. It's a time when some of us, musicians and producers and things like that, will buy new gear because we can write it off, right? And that's me right now. I need to update my monitoring situation. I have had the A7Xs forever. I love them to death. But they have both developed a buzz. There's a power amp issue. It's a fairly known issue with those speakers in the power section, where there's this very low level buzz that in any other environment you could get away with, but in the studio environment, it's bugging me to the point where I want to replace them. I could fix them. It would cost me $1,000. I think what I'm probably going to do is replace those with a pair of A4Vs because I use a sub 7 here in the studio down here at my feet. The size of the monitor to deliver that last octave is not necessarily the most important thing to me. I'm trying to balance out, like everybody else, I'm balancing out my budget and my needs for the studio. In this process, however, I found a few things that made me go on a buying spree of sorts. And today I wanted to talk to you about particularly one and secondarily a second set of monitors that I've purchased in the last few weeks. Primarily the D3Vs, these guys. So this is a desktop, very mobile studio. I would still call it a studio monitor. I think they classify it very much as a desktop monitor on the Adam website. For me, they are a direct replacement for these. The iLoud Micro by IK Multimedia. Now, I'm going to try to get through this quickly because this is obviously just an opinion piece, right? I'm not going to do any kind of scientific shootout. There are those reviews, not so much on YouTube, but certainly if you want to dive into that, you can. I am just a massive fan of Adam. I love that signature sound of the folded ribbon tweeter. What that affords me, particularly in vocals and things like reeded horns, like saxophones and things like that, that somewhere between 3 and 6K range. For me, when I got my A7Xs, which was years and years ago, immediately my mixes started translating much better in the outside world. So while I have loved these guys for the time I've had them, which hasn't been that long, and I will say this, if your number one consideration for this is size and weight, you cannot go wrong with the iLouds. These are substantially smaller than the Adams, right? By any metric. They are shorter, they are less wide, they are less deep, they are lighter. And so if that bit of difference in terms of size or weight is a big consideration for you, you can't go wrong with the iLouds. But beyond that, to me, I wouldn't say different class in terms of sound. These sound great. They're very impressive for the size. If you prefer the Adam signature sound, you're going to prefer the D3Vs, period. I don't imagine anyone would disagree if they are a fan of that sound and they've checked out both of these speakers. I wouldn't understand if you came to that conclusion. D3Vs have balanced inputs, TRS, but they're balanced. More importantly, for the mobile rig, they also have built-in DA, so they have a USB-C connection directly to your laptop. If that's your rig, you're done. That's all you need. They have a headphone jack on the front of the primary speaker, which is I want to say it's the left speaker with the volume knob on it. There's a way to use the button on the front to switch your LNR. There's all kinds of features that this has that iLoud just don't have. The primary one is the fact that it has a built-in DA. that's a massive thing. That's how I've been primarily using these as their own interface. And in conjunction with my UA stuff, I can use an aggregate interface I create, and it's all one thing, and it's worked great that way. They obviously sound different than my A7Xs, which I've had in the studio forever. They have a different overall sound, but there was enough similarity, particularly in that high end, to where with a few minutes of calibration, listening to source material I'm familiar with, these have translated great. And I have to find a slightly bigger case for my mobile stuff because they are definitely replacing my iLouds at this point. They get substantially louder before they clip than the iLouds. Even just at a feature set level, it's hard for me to see why you would buy the IKs over these Atoms. But here's another big caveat for those who might be listening still. There's another set of Atoms for $300, and that's the T5V. And let's see if I can give you a shot of these. Oh, sorry, don't mean to make you sick. But here's another set of much more substantial monitors for $300, right? So if you are just outfitting your studio, your home studio or production room, whatever you have, and you are on a tight budget, you have $300 to spend on monitors. Again, coming from my only qualification for you is I don't have Grammys on the wall. I'm just a working class guy, musician, and producer. But as an Atom fan, I've had these T5Vs up on my shelf, being them directly against my A7 Xs, which are just below right now, but they've been up on the shelf side by side with these. And while the A7s certainly have something that neither of these smaller speakers, that any of these smaller speakers have, but particularly talking about the T5Vs and the D3Vs, there's a soundstage thing, particularly front to back, that the A series have that I don't hear as much of in these other speakers. And if you're in a much larger room, I think the 7s will translate better in terms of just being further apart, being louder at the back of the room. But if you're in a room like this, about 12, 15, 20 feet, and you're packed full of stuff like I am, these T5Vs are absolutely tremendous value at $300 a pair, in my opinion. If you're an Atom fan already, no brainer. If you're mobile, if you need to be mobile, if you need to pack these out in a little case, these D3Vs, wow, this is getting hard, are absolutely incredible. That's how they're going to live for me. They're going to live in that world. On the desk with these built-in stands, which are pretty easy to take on and off. They're great. They have a mic stand adapter threading on the bottom, so you can use something like these Billions. I think they're $12 for these guys. That's how I was using them for part of my listening tests, I guess. But the last week or so, I've had them on my desktop just because my displays are back behind them, and it didn't make sense for me to have them that tall. And they've been helpful, even against my A7s, and now with the T5Vs in the place of those, just testing those out as well. They're really fantastic, but I think they will excel on the road. They get much louder than the iLouds before they clip, and the DA sounds great to my ears and has integrated fine with everything I've thrown at it in terms of building an aggregate interface on the Mac. So that's really, I'm not going to do any sort of recording in the room. Those things always fall flat to me. Very few folks are able to do that well. I'm not one of them. I will say that the D3Vs down to about 45 hertz are very usable. I swept just before this video to make sure I was in the neighborhood, and down to like 40 hertz, things were very audible and fairly even, like surprisingly even across that low end part of the spectrum. After about 40 hertz, they dropped off very fast at 37, 36, 37 hertz. In this room anyway, it was gone. I would have to crank it up substantially to hear anything below that. But down to 45 hertz, I'm trusting what these are telling me. And that's really about the same as the A7Xs, which is mind-boggling to me. So if you have $300 to spend and size is the biggest factor, here you go. This is your solution. Amazing for the size. if you have 300 bucks to spend and you need to be mobile, but you can go a little larger, the GVs just, man, there's just no question to me that right now in that price range, I don't know how you get better than these guys for the size. Really fantastic. The fact that it has built-in DA, balanced inputs, these passive radiating drivers on the side makes such a big difference in terms of how the low end feels in your listening space. If you have a listening environment where you're 3 feet or closer, man, what a great experience it is. If you're trying to outfit a control room, a editing space, or workstation, it's a little larger, and this is going to be a permanent solution that doesn't need to be mobile. These T5Vs, I mean, I'm blown away with what they do for 300 bucks compared to a $1,600 set of monitors. I had no trouble listening to these for extended periods of time and having mixes translate. There's a little bit of something that gets lost on the soundstage, front to back, that kind of granularity and what you and how deep you can listen into the mix, if that makes any sense. But again, I think you have to spend quite a bit more to get that. And at the end of the day, will it really make a difference in what you're doing in terms of your mixes? I don't know, maybe. But if you don't have that money, it's not really a question, is it? So for 300 bucks, you can't go wrong with either one of these. But they definitely have different use cases, and I'm just happy that Adam is making something that's priced this way for both of those use cases. I'm a big fan, and don't think you can go wrong. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.